Vanessa, you are a seasoned HR professional, so I would love to get your thoughts on a scenario. Let's say you have two applications. Applicant one is top of their class, 4.0 GPA, but zero work experience, zero internships, zero associations. So that's applicant one. Applicant two, their GPA is not as high. Maybe they're at 2.7, 2.8, but they have a bunch of stellar internships, testimonials from previous bosses. Which one do you interview for the next steps?
I think I will most probably interview both because I love interviewing people. I will give a chance to both applicants because it's the right thing to do. I will have a lot of questions for applicant number two. I will be interested in their learnings from all this work experience they had. I will try to understand their observation. I would like to see what has worked for them, what has not, because I think at the beginning of what is important is really to experience things and to see which department or organization works for you. So I will try to understand more about their experience. For number one, I need to be more creative in my questioning. I will talk a little bit more about their hobbies. Maybe the hobby is not on the list because the person thinks that it's not very attractive, or and maybe this person wants to be very professional. So I will ask about their hobbies, about the time they spend with their friends, what they do, the type of activities they like, and maybe describe for me one of their best holidays, because that could be also a good way for me to understand their personality. But I think I will go, Joe, for the two interviews and adapt my questions to the two candidates.
Okay, love it. That was a tough question. There was a reason I was asking because many of my students throughout the years, if they don't feel like they at the top of their class, they didn't make the dean's list, then they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get passed up for all these opportunities. So I'm always trying to tell them there is real world work experience through internships, associations, volunteering, and so on, just to make sure that they don't feel like they're out of the loop. That makes sense.
I totally agree with you. And I like right now, I'm myself supporting the education of my children. One of my kids decided to go picking up the trash every Sunday morning from 6 to 8. This was not easy to find at the age of 14, but I managed to find in the CC Community Club an association that is doing
Yeah.
that. And she's learning a lot about all these aunties taking care of her. She is learning a lot of interesting like life experience from the aunties. So it started as a volunteering for the future of our planet.
Yeah.
And now I have my daughter sharing with me a lot about the wisdom she is receiving from all these ladies who are kind and take her to pick up trash. I think you can learn anywhere, any format. I'm amazed to see the amount of reflection this trash picking is generating. This is interesting.
I love it. As a father, I feel like this is something I would like to do to build the skills and also empathize with the people and what's going on, as well as the world. So I love that.
Yes.
Another question I'd love your thoughts on is something that keeps popping up. I do a lot of career workshops with university
Mhm.
students, and they're constantly asking, how do I stand out? What are some things that you've seen over the years that you're like, wow, this is really a standout profile or standout candidate?
I think the things that come to my mind when you are asking me the question, Joe, is the word authenticity. I like people who are unapologetically themselves and the ones who are remaining true to their value and true to their identity despite the pressure or despite the stakes. So sometimes standing out might not be actually being the loudest in the room. It can be the kind soul, the reflective person. And what really stands out for me is the fact that what they say or what they express is directly in line with what they believe in. When there is authenticity, it has a certain smell for me. It resonates with my heart, it resonates with my soul. I usually give more attention to the people who are like that than maybe others who believe that they need to sound like someone. My advice to all these students is remain in line with who you are and try to be the best version of yourself. Be yourself, not someone else.
They're asking me, how do I stand out without standing out? How do I stand out and be myself without culturally being too diverse or abrasive or going against the grain where it obviously declines their chances? So This is a constant balancing act. They're trying to find, especially when they're young, how do I be myself
Of course.
in a corporate situation?
I think what is important is first and foremost try to be using all of us, we have what I call situational intelligence.
Mhm.
And situational intelligence is something that is a huge gift that human beings have in abundance. And it requires to adapt yourself to the audience and to adapt yourself to the setting. Take time to observe, read the room, and to see from my intuition what is basically the mood or what is actually the temperature of the room. Because if you go and visit, for instance, a private bank for the first time, I would imagine this place would be maybe a little bit more conservative, a little bit more expecting more conformity.
Mm.
But a place like Sephora would be full of laughter, smiles, and it might be a place where we welcome actually a different way of thinking and a lot of out of the box imagination. But in order for you to stand out, you have first and foremost to define exactly what is the room. So read the room first and understand the people in the room first. And based on that, give the best version of yourself. I encourage people to take a little bit of time to really smell exactly what is the proper spices that they use in that
Mm.
special kitchen.
Love it. As a chef, I love that analogy. It's very true, right? And this is the funny thing. I was speaking with one of my students. So taking a step back, I guess you could say, is finding a culture, finding a company that fits. This semester, I had a student who was in financial services, very bubbly, very creative, and she was going into accounting. And I said, she was telling me about some of the interviews she's had and how it was misaligned. She tried to be herself, but then it was misaligned with, like you said, the flavors, the scents in the room. And she felt, am I in the wrong place? And she was lost in that situation.
So I just want to share with you an example which maybe your students will find amusing. I'm teaching like you, Joe, and recently I've been teaching at SUSS for a group of adults at NTUC. This is the trade unions of Singapore,
Mhm.
and I'm teaching industrial relationship officer, and they are fantastic people. But the first time we met, they thought they were in the wrong room because they didn't expect a Caucasian person to be teaching human resources for the NTUC organization. So actually took on me to spend a little bit of time to make sure that they are comfortable with me because I know my accent is a French accent and vocabulary might not be exactly the word. It reminded me as a teacher, as an educator, that it's my role to make sure I take measure of the room and I bring myself into education in a way that people will find comfortable, that there is nothing that I do, say, or the voice I use that is making them feel that this is not the right place for them. This is a good example, even a person with many years of experience to realize that this is the moment to eat humble pie and
Mm.
to really be cautious and make sure that I don't hurt their feelings by saying something they might take negatively.
Yes, absolutely. This is a slight tangent, but I do something similar. Even though I spent most of my life in Asia, I grew up in the US and I'm cognizant of what I look like. My trick is every time I go into a new country or market, I introduce myself in the local language as
Mm-hmm.
best as I can. They always giggle, get a joy out of it. It just helps, like you said, bring that connection together. I tend to use humor, I try to make the environment very light, but I always make a joke of myself, right? I never make a
Mm-hmm.
joke about the people or the country or anything like that. I'm constantly making jokes myself, and they feel, oh, going back to what you said, humility. This
Mm-hmm.
person doesn't feel like they're better than us. He's not here to talk down to us. He's hopefully down to earth and he can relate to us. So I think having the sensitivity of the people in the room in terms of personality, but I think culturally in terms of where we
Yes.
are in the world.
Is really important. And the culture is also the culture of the workplace because you can be in Singapore and you can be in the CBD and moving from one level to another, you will find different cultures. On level three, you might be super attractive as a candidate and you
Yeah.
move to level five and all of a sudden you are less attractive. So I think it's a comparison that we have used that maybe can be useful to the students as well.
And it reminds me of when I used to work at LinkedIn and you see the private bankers in their formal suits, and then you see my colleagues like t-shirts, jeans, and sneakers. And we were separated by one floor, but the contrast was wildly different. Being cognizant of that is important. When you're choosing where to work and the people you work with is really important. Another thing I would love your thoughts on, and this is shifted a lot since
Yeah.
I was a graduate many years ago. Many students and executives are trying to
Mhm.
navigate this as an applicant. We have tracking
Yeah.
systems. Some students have AI interviews, bots. I'm
Yeah.
curious, in your experience, how do you see AI playing a role in the future of recruitment, hiring, and personal development?
This is a very good question, Joe. To be honest, I encourage students to get to the human connection as soon as they can.
Yes.
I believe that there is nothing better than the human connection. Even the one we are having today on Zoom is okay, it doesn't matter. So I think that the idea is if you need to go through these steps, and these steps are here for a reason. Usually, this is what I consider a filter.
Mm.
So it's a you just have some parameters and you want to filter and you want to make sure that you're focused on selection of candidates who are
Mhm.
in line with your requirements. The rule of the game, which is very logic. I think you need
Mhm.
to use your hat with a lot of logic in there. You need to go back to the question, what are the competencies, attributes, or things based on the job description, research on this role, or based on the research I've done on this company, are going to help me to be part of the selection. I think this is a little bit like a game with clues. You are given clues actually along the way about the things, if you do your research well, about the
Yeah.
things that are actually valued in that culture or valued in that role, valued in that workplace. And I think what is important is to identify the clues and logically see, hopefully with intellectual honesty, answer them the best way you can so you can have a human interaction. The prize is
Mm.
human, because the human interaction is going to give you a playground that is much wider and much more open to question, to interaction, to testing. So yeah, give that as a piece of advice, built with logic, built with algorithm. There are some parameters, identify the parameters. Hopefully you will answer them and have the prize of talking to a human being.
I love that. I want to get your thoughts more about talking to the human being because I talk about this a lot in my recent book. The analogy I use is like connecting the dots, right? So if you have the paintings and the coloring books, things like that. Because what I encourage my students is put together a repository of all your skills, all your experiences, all your know-how, and then map that, like you said, based on your research. If you're going to Sephora, you're going to see what skills they need, how does that fit my personality, and then connect the two. But I love your analogy about using it as a clue, gamifying it. Everyone likes games, so making it
Yes,
fun, less stressful. It makes the process
yes.
a lot easier.
So if you feel like it's a game, I think because the robot is just a robot, this is good news. Let's try to have fun with the robots and enjoy the time when you have with the human being.
Yes. And this is what I want to get your thoughts more on because in my book, I interviewed different people, my former students, executives, and I try to get a sense of the most effective tactics in terms of getting their jobs. And most of them popped up in the same thing. Human relationships, networking came up again. And that ended up being the core theme. I don't want people flooding you with LinkedIn messages or emails. But when you were trying to build that connection with someone, and you, particularly an employer that you want to work with, what advice would you give someone? Because I think this is applicable whether you're a fresh graduate or you're an executive.
I like people who have done their homework. And I like people who are coming with questions, genuine questions. Like yesterday, I had a candidate who was coming with a paradox, two different things he found on the website
Mm.
that he felt was paradoxical. Is it like this or like that? I was really intrigued by his question, and I thought it was the beginning of a rich conversation because paradox is everywhere. It's
Mm.
normal. We are human beings, so we love paradox. I could feel behind that question that the candidate really wanted to make sure that the environment was in line with what he could offer in terms of his ability to manage ambiguity, his ability to manage the fast-paced environment of retail. I appreciate the sincerity, the homework, and the concern. For me, it boils down to one concept, intellectual honesty. I
Mm.
really appreciate intellectual honesty. Like when you approach me, Joe, I could feel like you were genuinely interested in providing your students with some pieces of advice. You touch my heart because I thought, oh, he works at uni and really wants to make a difference for his students. I thought, this is a message I want to answer. I felt your intellectual honesty. I felt your sincerity. And that started a relationship. I think this is something used in many different situations.
Thank you so much for the words. I really appreciate that. I think as someone setting those messages, for me, I'm very selective on where I have my time and even the people I have speak to my students because I want them to get the very best knowledge. I had followed you on LinkedIn, saw your post and things like that. And I was like, okay, this is someone who is providing some practical advice that I think that can be carried on to anyone, whether it's students or executives and so on. So yes, I think that's genuine curiosity, that genuine interest is extremely important. And I'd love to get your thoughts because oftentimes my students will do company research and things like that. How important is research on the person you're interviewing with, right? So obviously there's a big difference between person A versus person B and what they like, their background. So how important is that type of research?
I think it's useful, but at the same time, you want to be very careful about not being seen as artificial
Mm,
because I can feel very strongly when people are trying to flatter me or they try to make
yes.
me feel good about myself. They try to, we all have egos. Of course, if someone tells you, like, oh, you're the best HR I've ever met in my life, you
Yeah.
want to believe, even if you know it's not true. Interviewers are looking for techniques and ways to remain objective. This is very
Mm,
important for people who are doing recruitment. I try to remind myself I have biases, positive and negative. It's like a doctor giving a diagnosis. The doctor sometimes seems a little bit cold because the doctor wants to remain very objective, but he wants to be sure that the diagnosis is the primary focus before the relationship with you. So that gives us sometimes the feeling the doctor is not very kind or empathetic. The recruiter has the same thinking. I want to do a good job to make sure that there is the right connection between the job I have to fill in and the person I have in front of me. The connection with me doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, I'm not the hiring boss, I'm not
mhm,
the hiring manager. If I want you to work with one of my colleagues, what
mm,
is critical? The relationship you have with my colleagues more than the relationship you have with me. You can use the research on LinkedIn to give you an idea. For instance, some people identify me as European
mhm.
or French, so they shrink around my accent. That's good because when they see me, they don't feel annoyed by the accent or they feel less annoyed by the accent. That's useful. Some people try to praise me for something I've done. This is where I feel more uncomfortable. I'm thinking, what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to bias me? I would be careful about that just
Mm,
to make sure we can be as objective as we can. At the end of the day, if you have a connection with someone because you find out they are passionate about, let's say, drama, and you're passionate about
mm.
drama, why not using it? Because it gives you a breaker, it gives you a conversation starter. It's something you can use. Be very careful and remain intellectually honest.
There's a subtle but big difference between fake flattery and genuine interest or compliments. I get flooded with messages, oh my gosh, I'm so impressed by your work. Are you really? Or is this a canned message? I caution students, do not use fake flattery. Everyone is smart enough to see through that and it'll actually repel people. Yes, I agree. Don't try to appease someone by appealing to their ego when you don't mean it. And then many folks don't really like it. But on the flip side, if you have a genuine interest or something, because this is I'm always they're always asking me for like a formula, and I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough is the chemistry you have. And I know once again we're unbiased and things like that, but when you are a hiring manager, for example, you have to like the person. I can't work 40 hours a week with you if I do not like you. It doesn't matter how capable you are. So this is a thing that's slightly controversial, but I think it's important. And who I've hired over the years is, yes, they have to be capable. Yes, they have to be able to do the job, but there has to be a fit within the personality.
If you look at some management concept around trust, you will find that in the trust equation, there is something interesting called intimacy. Some people get it wrong because when we say in English, these people are intimate, it can be very like double and it can
Yeah.
be dangerous. But intimacy, when you look at the raw definition, the raw concept of intimacy without any of it, we have a connection that is meaningful, having depth. That is what I would like the chemistry to look like. I would like
Mhm.
the people to feel comfortable with each other, but in a way that allows them to build trust, connection, partnership. At the end of the day, we are wired like this that we will hire people with whom we feel more comfortable. You need to be very careful because intimacy with colleague with whom you have worked for 15 years is very different compared to someone you met yesterday or you just met 1 hour ago. What are the tiny steps you can create, you can generate in order for that connection to feel genuine and to be reasonable in terms of in 60 minutes, this is what we can afford to do?
I think that's a good point because this is a mistake I see, not necessarily candidates, but when I used to do like sales training, is most salespeople will try to jump the gun and be too intimate too quickly. And it would be
Mhm.
jarring for the prospect. You're like, whoa, slow down. And I see that happening with people trying to get a job. They use that same tactic to be as intimate as possible in that short second. But if you've never met someone, it doesn't make sense to force that relationship too quickly. So I like the idea of bringing in these baby steps because you only have 60 minutes, for example, you can't
Exactly.
accomplish everything.
Think of a realistic positive connection if I spend 60 minutes with that person. How does it look in terms of eye contact, parting words, body language? What does it look like? Reflect on this because the way you are going to say to someone you have met for the first time is very different compared to someone you have met 25 times.
Oh, yes.
Think of the intensity of the body, the gesture, voice, wording. These are things maybe will help you before you enter the room to have more clarity about what you're trying to achieve. And you will be closer to that exact intensity compared to being off either too low or too high in terms of your intensity.
I love that. I often tell students visualization is important, but you've taken it to the next level in terms of intonation, parting words, body language. That makes it much more real because oftentimes they're super nervous. At anyone base doesn't mean students, executives are super nervous. I think visualization can help prepare the mind for what's going to happen in the 60 minutes that the interview is taking place. So I love that. My final question is with all the information available and students hitting up ChatGPT for advice, what's one piece of advice you would give job seekers or applicants that they won't be able to find on ChatGPT that's looked or underestimated when it comes to really making a strong impact as a candidate?
Visit the stores or get closer to the product of the company in a way that is very consumer centric. The best interviews are with people who have gone to the SEPHORA stores. They share their experience in a very humble manner. This is fantastic because this means that you're already in our stores. If it's a hotel, go to the lobby and smell the lobby and tell me what it smells in the lobby, or spend 20 minutes watching what is going on. If you are applying for Singapore Airlines, tell me about your experience with Singapore Airlines when you began 6 months ago. These are the things that I personally think that very valuable because they're very concrete and they show your interest for the business. What I'm looking for is people who are passionate about our business, whatever business you're applying for. So you cannot be wrong, even if your experience is negative. You cannot be wrong because you are going to show that you care that this experience is improved. So I think maybe the piece of advice that maybe is underlooked and that I would love people to take on board.
I love that. And we use this concept. I'm constantly preaching about in marketing about getting as close to the customer as possible. So if you put yourself in the shoes of the customer and you're once again going to the lobby, you're going to the store and you're going through monitoring people, how they interact and stuff like that, taking notes and feeding that back, that's lovely, right? For the B2B folks, a bit different. For those watching or listening, you may not be able to visit a factory, but you can go to the website, look at the case studies, see
Yes.
how their clients are talking about them, what industries they're in, and so on. Will give you a great idea, like you said, about the essence of the business. So I love that.
And put yourself in the shoes of a businessman or a businesswoman and tell me how it feels. And that's worth 1,000 words. What do you see as a businessman or as a businesswoman?
Yes. I totally agree. Vanessa, thank you so much for coming on the show. There's been so many pearls of wisdom that I'm going to share with my students and also once again executives who write to me. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Joe. I wish all the students all the best in their job search, their internship search. I'm happy to receive their invite on LinkedIn. And I look forward to meeting you in person, Joe, whenever you visit Takashimaya.
I'll ping you next time I'm there.
Take care of you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. I will see you in the next episode.